And good afternoon from Philadelphia. Frank here, ready for a special Wednesday edition of UFO News Network Sunday. We're all set to go, so let's not waste any time. Let me bring in my co-host, Chant Hanna. Good afternoon, Chant. Tell us what we've got in store for the folks today.
I will, and I would also like to say Happy Valentine's to everybody.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Happy Valentine's Day, Chant.
Happy Valentine's Day. Yes, we have an incredible guest on today. Her name is Melinda Leslie, and she's a wonderful person, a friend of mine, and is a UFO abductee and has been public with her own extraterrestrial and covert ops human abduction experiences for 28 years, and is considered by many to be the authority on a military and intelligence agency involvement in UFO abduction cases. Both her research and her personal experiences have been featured in 24 books by prominent authors in ufology. Melinda is an investigator in the field of ufology with almost 30 years of experience. For 8 years, she has been the owner of UFO sightings in Sedona, Arizona, where she has conducted 1,000 tours, over 1,000 tours now, with the use of military night vision goggles. To date, Melinda's 6,500 plus tour clients have felt they always had a true UFO sighting on every tour except for one. Melinda has lectured for numerous organizations, including UFOCon and Contact in the Desert, the International UFO Congress, MUFON, the X Conference, the Bay Area UFO Expo, the Whole Life Expo, and more. She is a frequent guest on numerous radio shows, including a repeat guest on Coast to Coast AM, appeared on several television shows, and is currently co-host of Transcending Realities, a new TV show on IVOVLOVETV.com on all things UFO, spiritual, and conspiracy. And please check out her website, UFOsightingtours.com. Welcome, Melinda.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And yes, happy Valentine's Day to you
Valentine's
guys too.
Day.
To everyone out there. You know, anyone listening now and certainly listening the rest of today, happy Valentine's Day and happy belated Valentine's Day to anyone catching this later on the replay. But yeah, you know, being that I'm not seeing anyone right now, I don't have any Valentine's plans, but that's all right. I hope everyone else there does and gets to do something really romantic and special with their significant other. So there you go. And thank you guys for having me on. I'm so excited. I'm so looking forward to this. You know, one thing, as you're reading my bio there, I'm kind of chuckling because I had contacted them ahead of time and said, change that part to over 1,000 tours.
Yeah.
And I was just chuckling. And
you're going to need like a McDonald's sign where they kept updating them. 4 billion
right,
served,
right.
5 billion served, you know.
Yeah. Well, actual number of clients. And when I see tours, that means taking groups of people out. So I've done that now 1,001 times. And I'd be at 1,002 if it wasn't for the fact that here in Sedona we have rain. So, and I'm in Sedona, Arizona, and we have tremendous rain going on today anyways. And it's been cloudy the last couple of nights, or I probably would have had a few more people. But yeah. And it's, you know, and it's 6,500 over. I've done the numbers. It's conservatively well over 6,500 people that I've taken out. So it's just crazy. And as you were saying, you know, we've had tours we've had sightings, UFO sightings on every tour but one. I mean, so that's 1,000. We had sightings more, and sometimes often, in fact, usually the case much more than just one object sighted. So I never dreamt in a million years when I started doing these tours that we would literally see them every time. I mean, it's nuts, but we do. I actually give people a money back guarantee because we see them every time, and it's a good thing because if we didn't, I'd go broke in a hurry. But
Melinda,
we do it.
Yeah, I have kind of a funny question to ask you, and that is, do you have enough military goggles for everyone? Because you never know how many people are going to join your group in a tour. Do you have plenty to go around?
Yeah, well, right now, it's a good question. I do get asked that a lot. Right now, I have 8 pairs, and I take up to 16 people because you're with me a little over 3 hours, but our viewing time, as far as actual what I call goggle time, is 2 hours and sometimes a little more. In 2 hours of viewing, your neck gets really sore, your arms get tired from looking up. You can't look the whole time. Plus, your eyes kind of get strained. So it works really well for up to 16 people with the 8 pairs. So but I do cut off to 16. So the most we have is like 2 people per pair. And what's really nice is actually when we have more people, we have more sightings. It's because there's more eyes scanning the sky, and there's more people using goggles. So when I tell my clients, when I have a smaller group and I've got like 3, 4, 5 people, I tell them, yay, you get goggles the whole time on the upside. Downside is your necks are going to get sore, your arms are going to get tired, you're not looking the whole time. And because you're not scanning the sky, we're having less sightings. So I tell people we actually have more sightings because there's more people looking with the goggles currently, you know what I mean, than when I don't have as many. So
right. It
works really, really well. I have tried in the past, occasionally I had a couple more people, and I've done a whole number of large, like group events with more people. And what I charge people changes and stuff if I get asked to do that. And depending on the situation and the event, it's very tricky, and people aren't getting that much goggle time. And, so on my tours, that's why I limit it to 16 people. And
so do you have a specific spot?
Hired to bring my goggles.
Do you have a specific spot do you have a specific spot that you go to?
Yes,
or,
yeah.
I mean, you drive out to the sticks a little bit, right?
Yes, we do. Now, luckily, Sedona is a dark sky city. All of Sedona, it has worldwide designation as a dark sky city, meaning we have lighting restrictions, so we maintain a beautiful nighttime sky. Now, because of that, we always see a lot of stars. In fact, with the goggles, you see 50,000 times more stars than you can see with your naked eyes. So in perfect viewing conditions, but we often have that. So, and so the stargazing alone. And so because that nighttime sky, all of Sedona, so pretty much anywhere in Sedona, you see pretty good. There's only like our main street that they have street lights on now where there's kind of some glare. But as soon as you get away from that at all. But yes, I do take people out up on a hill that's just outside of town. That's my favorite place. The only time I don't go right there is if part of the sky is cloudy and we have to get out from under the clouds. See, clouds reflect any ambient light. And with the night vision goggles, it's like staring at solid white walls. So I can't take people if it's too cloudy. And if part of the sky is really clear and we can get out from under clouds, that's when I'll change up locations. But my favorite location, choice number 1 is up on this hill. For those who are familiar with Sedona, it's between Airport Mesa Hill and Cathedral Rock. It's between them is a hill. We're up high. We have a nice 360-degree wide open view. And we have the benefit of a little more altitude. We're at 5,000 feet up there, and it's really great. Now, again, though, if it is cloudy right there, I have like a second, third, and fourth choice. They're also really good. In fact, recently I took a small group to what I'd call my third choice, and we had remarkable sight, and it was really, really, really good. And so just anywhere in Sedona, as long as you're away from that main drag, not only do you not, can you see all the stars and it's open, but also you're all looking at the same sky. So even if we go a couple miles this way, by the time you're looking up, you're kind of looking at the same thing.
Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about Sedona. I've been there many times, and it's a spiritual retreat. And for many people, there's hundreds of hiking and mountain biking trails. One of its main attractions are the red sandstone formations that glow a brilliant orange and red when they are illuminated by the rising or the setting sun. And there's only about 10,000 people that reside there. And it also has a very rich Native American history.
Yes.
Yeah, so you are very lucky to live in one of the most beautiful areas of the United States.
Yes, thank you. Sedona is famous, as you said, for its scenic beauty and its very powerful energy. It's considered a vortex location. It's on the World Energy Grid map as one of the places on the planet with the most amount of what are called ley lines or energy lines crossing in one location. And that's certain of our rock formations, because of their geology, are like taking that energy and intensifying it, channeling it up. Because of their unique geology. We have deep underground water aquifers, water rushing through the rocks. Above that is quartz, a conductor. Above that, granite capacitor, more quartz conductor. Above that, granite capacitor. And on top, as you were just saying, we're sandstone leaching out all this iron, which is what gives those beautiful red and orange colors you were just describing. And when you put that iron on top of a conductor, capacitor, and a rushing water underneath, which is a energy source. Well, we have a modern day term for that. It's called a battery. So it's literally like our geology is creating a giant battery, taking that energy, intensifying it, channeling it up. And then we have, what the locals and everyone calls the vortexes, which are those increased electromagnetic fields because of that. And that's the leading theory as to why Sedona is such a hot spot for sightings, those vortexes, that energy.
So, Melinda, real quick, are you a spotter, pretty good spotter yourself? I've been out with doing this type of thing with quite a few different people, and some are really, really good at spotting, and others have to be sort of pointed to whatever's up in the sky. Are you a pretty good spotter after all these years of doing it?
Frank, I think it's safe to say yes.
Okay.
I'm laughing because I'm thinking 1,001 tours. I've done the math. You guys, it's an insane number of sightings. I mean, I'm just going to be extremely conservative and say 20,000 sightings.
Got it.
I mean, literally, because we see
now
many
when you
things
see
every
something,
time.
you can direct these folks to the right spot in the sky. It's like there's one right there, but that doesn't help somebody who doesn't see it right away.
I train my clients so they're finding them. I mean, yes, I do. But by the end of a tour, my clients are expert spotters.
Right.
We're using high-powered laser pointers. And yes, we're very careful. We don't laser planes. I go through a whole thing on that with everybody, just so anyone listening goes, they're using lasers. No.
Laser pointer, that's cheating.
It is completely legal. It is legal here to use them. And secondly, it's just illegal to laser planes, and that's a huge safety issue, of course, because it can blind the pilots. So we're very careful not to do that, and I give everyone tons of instruction. And but then what we're doing is we're seeing things, moving. Obviously, we see things that stop, turn, change direction. We see things flying in formations, groups of things flying. And when I say a formation, they're not just loosely together; they're locked in perfect unison. And we flash at things even with our laser. We get things that flash back at us. Sometimes we've even gone like 1, 2, 3 with the laser, and stuff has gone 1, 2, 3 back at us many times.
Do you get any of this on video?
Yes, sometimes. I don't really have the equipment for doing it. It would take a night vision video camera of extremely high quality, and if I was doing that, I wouldn't be able to do everything else I have to do with my clients.
Yeah, it's expensive gear.
And finding them. Yeah, well, not that that's that bad. It's just, again, it's having the ability to spend my time kind of doing that. Now, having it said that, I have had a few people come out with night vision video equipment, night vision attachment for a video camera, and a friend of mine who has a way to film through a monocular goggle piece she has, one eye as opposed to two eyepiece. And anyways, long story short, I've had a number of people come out and film for me. So I do have some footage that is available. And actually more information about my tours is available at my website for my tours. And there's footage there you can watch. Now, not all of it, in fact, I'm going to update the website and I'm going to add some more of that. But right now, the way it is, you can go see this, and that's www.ufosightingtours.com. So again, UFO sighting tours with an S on the end, like plural, ufosightingtours.com. And also, I've got that same footage as well as a little bit of other stuff is available by looking up Melinda Leslie on YouTube as well. I got some stuff there.
Melinda, I know you know the difference because you're an expert by now regarding discerning the difference between a drone in the sky and an unidentified flying object or something else that could be possibly extraterrestrial related. How do you explain to the people in your tours the difference between a drone and something else in the skies?
Well, I spend a bunch of time in the beginning. When we first meet, we meet at where I do my tours out of the Center for the New Age. I'm an independent contractor there, but have a wonderful relationship with them. And we meet up there, and then we get out to, once we do that and use restrooms, take care of any business, and then we go out to the location. Usually my clients will follow in their own car. When we get out there, I set up chairs, and then I'm going to talk about all that, what we're going to see, not going to see, how to do it, etc. I talk for about half an hour. But I do cover all about the only way to know you're seeing a true UFO, unidentified flying object, is to rule out all the identifiable or known things first. And I tell everyone the identifiable or known objects predominantly fall into 4 categories. The first is stars and planets, category 1. Category 2, everything built and flown by mankind. And I explain how a lot of things are illegal to fly over Sedona at night, like you'll never see hot air balloons, dirigibles, gliders, that's illegal. So it comes down to planes, helicopters, and I'm even starting to hear, I think drones may be illegal, but until I know for sure, I'll say drones. And then, as I said, planes, helicopters, drones, that's category 2. Category 3, shooting stars, and category 4, last but not least, satellites. So, and what I do is I go through, without taking up a ton of time right now for this on the interview, but I do go through a complete explanation of all those categories, how to know what those are, the differences between them, what each restrictions are for those things. For instance, planes, helicopters, drones are all 100% required by the FAA, Federal Air Administration, to have blinking, strobing lights. They blink a mechanical, consistently, evenly spaced blink. Commercial or private have a single blink pattern, like blink, 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 and military aircraft have a double or triple pattern. And the reason is military aircraft have that different pattern is so all other pilots know that it's military and get out of the way. They always have the right of way, even in non-combat situations. So they're going to blink. So I tell everyone, anything blinking is a plane, helicopter, or drone. So we're looking for things that are a solid light. Now, why are things a solid light? Well, first off, everything, as I said, flown by mankind is required to have strobes. They have to have strobes because not all other things flying and not all ground personnel have radar. So the only way for them not to be running into each other all the time is they have to be visible. The objects that we're seeing are predominantly, there's 2, at least kind of my theory here, but I think it makes sense. The 2 predominant reasons we're seeing them is one is they're reflecting sunlight. And that's why you see satellites. There's no lighting on satellites. You see them because they reflect sunlight. So, so they're either reflecting sunlight, like when you see satellites, or they're self-luminous, meaning they're producing light in some way. And occasionally, now it's very famous in UFO sightings, and anyone who follows that and is serious, The most common color reported when people report seeing a color is what's called amber light, meaning anything that looks gold, orange, or red. Well, I had a plasma physicist. I had a physicist come out on my tour. I've had many, probably one in every 100 clients, I had a lot. But this gentleman, who was a plasma physicist, explained to us when we started to see amber lights, why we were seeing the amber. And it meant we were getting a huge, huge electrical charge around something so large, it was ionizing the air. And that ionization of the air, the first color you get are those amber shades, the gold, oranges, reds. And then he said, you multiply the power a lot, you then get the blue shift, it goes to blue, and then you multiply the power a lot more and you get the green. He explained that all to us. Well, we get amber lights almost every tour. I mean, I'd say every tour, but I'll play it safe and say 2 out of 3 tours. This last week, man, on my tour, we had huge, giant amber lights. I mean, and one of it was interesting. A plane had crossed its path, and I'm getting really good at kind of guesstimating the altitude of planes because we see them so much. And I know the maximum altitudes for commercial and then the difference between those and the military planes, and then, and and everything in between. Here we're up on a hill right next to our airport Mesa, so we have a small airport where we see planes during our tour sometimes take off and land. And, so I kind of know that. And I've had some pilots who've gone out with me kind of educate us. So I feel like I'm getting pretty good about that. Well, I feel like the other night, we had a plane that I was really guesstimating had to be between 10 and 20,000 feet. And it seemed, when we saw this big object, now, this big object could have been lower or higher than that, but it just seemed when the plane crossed near it that they were maybe very similar in altitude. Now, this other object could have been a lot larger and therefore higher up, sure. And so I figured it was probably higher up than the other, but if there was, but again, somewhere in that range, because it was just, and realizing, well, wait a second, that's something pretty darn close, Now, having it said that, people will always wonder about seeing your classic UFO shapes, like a disc or, a cylinder, a cigar ship or a disc, a big triangle. We have seen all those things, but I call that structured craft. And I think a lot of people in the field do. As far as seeing structured craft, structured ships, we have seen full structure on 24 of the tours. And some of those tours were more than one structured object in the sky. So it's actually about 35 structured craft spread out over 24 tours. All the other times, yes, we were seeing lights. But if you see a light stop, turn, change direction, fly in formations, et cetera. And so it's really cool. I mean, like I said, I never dreamt in a million years we'd see as much as we do.
So you went out and must have done a little bit of this on your own or with some friends or whatever the case may be before you started the tour. I mean, you just didn't start.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was turned on to this by, as many people in this UFO field were by the late Ed Grimsley, who lived up in Northern California, I think in Chico area or outside of Sacramento anyways. And I give him full credit as the person who figured out you could use military night vision goggles. And of course, Gen 3s are best. That's what we use on my tour. Generation 3. Well, Gen 4s would be good, but they're a lot more expensive. So,
right.
6,000 or, $6,000 as opposed to 4,000, So,
right.
Okay. But, so,
well, you wait for the Gen 5 to come out, and then you get the Gen 4s when they go down.
Well, those are available only to special forces still. There are higher gens, but they're only used by special forces, military special forces. So, but Ed figured out that I guess he had night vision or was using it to look at the sky. I'm not quite sure how that came about, other than he was the person who discovered you could have all these sightings with night vision. Now, had other people ever done it before? Maybe, but it didn't really become known in the UFO field till Ed was out there doing it. He started to bring goggles to conferences, show other people what he was saying. There's a famous thing where he took out a radio host, George Norrie, and showed him. But the first time I ever looked with night vision was with Ed Grimsley. up in the Bay Area at the Bay Area UFO Expo. He was taking people out in the parking lot, and I looked with the goggles and had my mind blown. And then I did that with him at a couple other conferences. He used to bring goggles out to the International UFO Congress when it was in Laughlin, Nevada, and go out there and did it with him there. And then a friend of mine, at the time I was living in Southern California before moving here to Sedona, and her and I came to a conference out here where he was there a couple nights of the conference, taking people out with the night vision. And that's where I first had the idea of doing a business with it here. And he was extremely supportive of my doing that business here. And I always told him I would give him credit for being the person that turned me on to it, because it's the truth. In fact, he's, like I said, I think all of ufology owes Ed Grimsley for the fact that we're all looking at the sky with military night vision goggles now, as kind of the father of that movement, if you will.
And also, you mentioned Laughlin, Nevada. There's a big conference that you're involved with putting together, UFO MEGACON, coming up in Laughlin next month, I believe it is, in March. So
well,
why don't you tell us all about that?
Sure. I'm going to be a speaker at it. I'm doing a lecture, a complete updated lecture on my MILABS research, which is MIL for military and AB for abduction. I know we're going to get into that in a minute. But I'm doing that lecture there on the Wednesday in the middle of the week. And then I'm on their board of directors. I'm not one of the producers of the conference, but I was asked just to kind of consult. And I'm very good friends with the producers, which is Lorraine Fenton and Bob Brown. And both of them, I talk to frequently about it. And so I've been kind of helping them out. One of the things I did put together, and I'm so proud of this and so excited, because it was my idea to do it. And then I contacted the guys, and, I've made it work, which, totally. I mean, I produced this one part, which is our military witness panel. And I know you guys know all about that. Anyone listening who is a part of our closed private Facebook page for the ATIP, or the open page, the Advanced Aerospace page, both of those, these gentlemen have come about mostly because of their involvement in those pages. And we're emphasizing the primary event of the Nimitz aircraft carrier sighting event and the witnesses of that, which is also the famous Tic Tac Fleur video footage.
Yep. You got, let me jump in and
assuming that you're.
Let me jump in and plug Dave Beatty, who runs that group that you were talking about. Dave is going to be there. Yeah. He's going to be presenting live. Yeah. And Kevin Day was the radar operator on the Princeton for that event, and also had a sighting himself. So he saw it on radar and saw it with his own eyes. He's going to be there as well. And who else is going to be on that panel?
Okay. So Dave Beatty, and Dave wasn't a military witness of the event, but what he's done in putting together his film that he put out there, a short 20-minute film that he did as a reenactment of the event, because it was following the whole story of that whole incident. When he made that and put it out there, he wanted to find the witnesses that were willing to, participate in it and give him first-hand account information so he could be as accurate as possible. And so he put feelers out. And then on top of it, after doing so, more guys came forward. So more than anybody else, Dave has his finger on the pulse of that whole story. He's talking to all the witnesses. Now, of course, he's talking to the witnesses that can come forward, like I'm having on my panel. And then he's talking to witnesses. There are a few that were on a AWAC plane that signed a non-disclosure agreement, but he's spoken with them. He can't go forward because they signed an NDA with their stuff. He can say their story. He's eliminating, not saying their names, and so he knows that whole story. And then he's got a few guys that currently are either in the military or work for subcontractors to it that, quite frankly, are afraid of maybe losing their careers. Okay. So, and it's not that they were ever told not to talk. That's not it. They just don't want to create problems, or there are also just a couple guys who are just completely scared to come out for whatever reason. They want to see other guys come out first before they do. And they're telling Dave and they're telling the other guys, we're going to watch what happens with you. And if everything goes well and you're supported, we'll come out. It's the good old fashioned, you guys, quite frankly, it's the fear of ridicule. Mm-hmm. It's good old fashioned fear of ridicule, which is still alive and well, with this subject matter. And so going back to, in answering your question, that was kind of a long way about, but we said we have Dave Beatty, we have Kevin Day.
Yeah.
We have PJ Hughes.
Okay. PJ's been on with us.
Okay. On there. And we have Gary Voorhees. And we kind of have a new addition to that group, which is Kevin Turner. So we will have those 5 gentlemen on the panel. Dave is going to be there, even though, like I was saying, he's not a witness of it himself, because he's able to speak for the guys that haven't come forward. He's able to speak for the guys that signed the NDAs. So he's able to tell their stories and their part of the scenario and what we're going to do on this panel. And then the MC, let's not forget that, very importantly. Our MC is Emmy Award-winning television producer Robert Kiviat. Robert Kiviat has been following this story just pretty much as closely as Dave. He's very much up on it. He's actually giving a full lecture at our conference as well as emceeing the panel. And Kevin Day himself on our Saturday is going to give a full lecture because his whole story involves even more, and the way Kevin was personally affected by the experience and affected by coming out and what it means for him to have come out as a whistleblower and everything. So he has a huge dramatic story that's more personal for him. And so we're actually having him do that full lecture on Saturday, but the Wednesday before that is the panel. And the panel, the whole point is to get to what exactly happened, the chain of events. How did it unfold? What a lot of people don't know is this wasn't just one sighting one day. This was a military exercise of 9 ships out in the water, training and kind of brushing up before they were going to be sent to the Middle East again. And I think they were out in the water about 10 days. There were 9 naval vessels, 6 ships, and 3 submarines. The sightings lasted, my understanding is, for at least, there's some debate whether it's 4 to 6, but at least 4 of the days, maybe up to as many as 6, continual sightings. And Kevin, being the lead radar person on the Princeton at the time, gave the call to say, hey, maybe, and told his commanding officer, I think we should send someone up to go check this out. And made the call, okay, and his commanding officer then let the Nimitz know, that then sent the planes. But multiple planes were sent up repeatedly, and then this gun camera footage that now is known because of the New York Times article on the front page, New York Times, over a year ago, December, and the whole release of the existence of the ATIP program with the Pentagon, and of course to the Stars Academy, and how that all unfolded. But they released, the New York Times and then the Washington Post and Politico released this, this footage. Well, it was actually footage that was, most people following this story know this, it was already footage that was out there in the community, but they said that, but they kind of re-released it, if you will, to say, we've had this program at the Pentagon, and here's an example, the kind of thing we were looking at. But that footage was the floor footage that became what's known as the Tic Tac footage, because the pilot at the time commented that, well, it looks like a Tic Tac,
Right.
So
right.
That's how it got that nickname, Tic Tac candy, And anyway, so I think most of your listeners probably know that story, but there you go. So I'm so excited to have this panel, meeting these guys. I haven't met any of them in person. I've spoke to them on the phone. They've all become dear friends. I enjoy talking to them very much. I mean, even even Gary Voorhees' whole story and Kevin Turner's whole story. And when you talk to these guys on the phone, and I have probably, easily adding up to hours, and it's just fascinating. And you guys, these guys are heroes to come forward. You go, why is there only 5? There's a crew of 5,000 on the Nimitz and a crew of 400 on the Princeton, and this other boat has 300 and another boat has 500, and you go, well, first off, not everyone involved was a witness to it in some way. They maybe heard about it on ship, but as far as whether they saw it with their own eyes and or saw firsthand evidence or something, okay, these guys did. But more importantly, as I said, some of the other guys aren't coming forward. They don't want to come forward. They're afraid, or they have current jobs or something that they think might be at risk. I think after this panel, it's going to open up the floodgates. We're going to have a lot more of these individuals coming forward. I mean, right now, for instance, we know for sure of 5 pilots involved that have come forward. There's probably more, but those are the ones that me and I know some other researchers are well familiar with. I would love, and if anyone's listening to this and you are one of those pilots, I would love to have one of the pilots be on this panel. So if you are a witness to this, and again, you're listening to this later, if you were a witness to this event, a military witness, contact me. Private message me through Facebook. That's a good way, contacting me through Facebook. And certainly, if you contact Frank and Chant, and James
we'll
at the show, they'll put you in touch with me. They'll put you in touch with me. But if you're one of the witnesses, I would, to whatever degree you witnesses, I would love to have you there at the panel. The producers have said we're not limited to just these 5. We can add people, and we'd love to add people. And again, if you are one of the pilots or one of the pilots who is part of this, I would love to have you on that panel, to have your part of the story. How does your part fit in? How does it play out with the others? What is the timing of the events? What's the chain of events? How many days did it go over? How did it unfold over the days? And then there are also a couple of these guys were firsthand witnesses to the beginning of what you would call a cover-up of this, to outside individuals coming on board the ship and removing the records of the event.
Yeah,
and so my witnesses were personally directly involved in that.
Yeah, we got that from PJ when he was on. They got out there quick off the coast. They were, they weren't that far off coast.
Well, PJ Hughes, Gary Voorhees, and Kevin Turner were all firsthand witnesses to that. So they witnessed various aspects of that. But PJ was on the Nimitz, and he was in the secure room when they came and took the records. Same with Gary Voorhees. He was present in the secure room when they came and took the records. So they were directly involved in that. And then Kevin has an interesting story of witnessing these guys coming on board, in one of the incidences coming on board. So these guys were firsthand witnesses to that. 3 of the folks on the panel were firsthand witnesses to the incident as far as seeing the craft with their own eyes, not just seeing it on the radar, but being on deck, seeing craft, and or looking through what are called the big eyes, the big binoculars, and seeing it that way on board. So 3 of them were firsthand witnesses to the event. Kevin not only was firsthand witness to the beginning of the cover-up, but firsthand witness to the fact that he saw while on board, like that day, the full footage of what was, we've seen just a little snippet, the FLIR footage. He says there's a half-hour long piece of footage. He's seen the whole thing, and he described that whole thing in detail. I mean, this panel is going to blow people's minds. When Frank, when you and James had these guys on this show, I heard that, of course, many of your listeners did. It was, and anyone who hasn't, go back and listen. It was a remarkable show. I got so excited because I already had this, panel lined up and everything. And I got so excited because I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I want this to be. What you guys did on the air and get in the technical details and how it unfolded and flesh out parts that even no one has heard yet. You guys did a remarkable job with that show. That's exactly what I want the panel to be. The only thing is you guys had 3 of the guys on the show. We have those 3 plus another 2. who have huge parts of that story. And we're going to have more time, and we're going to have more images. So we're going to really flush this out. What it is Bob Kiviat is going to ask the tough questions. He's going to grill the guy. Sorry, guys. But he's going to grill them. And Kevin's going to jump in with his whole detailed knowledge of it, and it's going to cause. And I told them, I said, what I want is a discussion on stage that the audience, sitting in front of you, is eavesdropping on. The panels, I foresee them in like big oversized easy chairs or something that's more like, like a kind of a talk show or living room kind of setup, and have, with a couch and stuff, and have it be where the audience is eavesdropping on these guys, is fleshing out how did the story happen, what are the details, and it's just like I said, it's going to be exactly what you did on your wonderful radio interview, but hopefully like that on steroids.
Yeah, and no internet breakdowns like we had, unfortunately.
Well, Melinda,
hopefully with less technical problems. So and we're going to have images. I'm working with Dave to have images. The whole conference is done split screen. There's the riser stage in the middle, and then everything's up on screens on either side. They're PowerPoints and videos and everything, and then blow ups of the speaker speaking and okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to have images. So even though this is a panel, I'm getting all that information from Dave to have images playing during it. So everything from pictures of these guys in uniform when they served, which will be fun to actually, see. Most of these guys have big beards and stuff now.
Yep.
So it'll be fun. And they didn't then, to say the least. And anyway, so and then it's some of the reenactment footage, some other related footage, pictures of the ships and so all that we'll have. And it's just going to be a remarkable event. And it was my idea to do it. I think what started that idea was, I think when Kevin came forward in our Facebook page room, I believe that's what led to, I think, John Burroughs and Linda Moulton Howe having him on Phenomena Radio, giving his story, and I listened to that. And then I started to meet the other guys in the room as they came forward and started to contact them. And, for the longest time, it looked like, okay, I'm only getting one of them willing to do it. Then I'm getting two. Then I'm getting three,
Right.
And I had to do some serious arm twisting, you guys, to get everyone willing to do this. And now they're all gung-ho. Now they're excited. They're gung-ho. And I hope, again, I really hope that maybe we'll get another witness or two joining us between now and the conference is the last week of this month. For everyone out there, it's in Laughlin, Nevada. The whole conference is a week long, 7 days, 8 nights, jam-packed with just the most amazing variety of speakers, amazing speakers who will have mind-blowing presentations. I have no doubt we're going to have a lot of standing ovations. People are just knocking it out of the park.
Why don't you run through some of the other names that are on the lineup? I'm looking at some small thumbnail photographs, certainly besides you, obviously. George Norrie's going to be there. I recognize Calvin Parker, Daniel Sheehan.
George Norrie's doing this really fun on Saturday night. Lorien Fenton is a longtime producer of many conferences, and she had her own conference for years called UFOCon. She had George Norrie come a number of times, and one time they did this really fun game show, like I think it's like based on who's telling the truth, and we have George coming. He's actually, I don't know if anyone listening has been to one of George's presentations that he goes out to major cities and he sings a little and tells stories and has different guests. It's kind of like we're doing one of those. So we're doing one of those George Norrie events where he's gonna sing and tell some stories and whatnot, and maybe interview one or two people. But then we're also doing this game show, and it'll be really fun because it's kind of hard to describe, but it was done at a previous conference and it was so much fun. So he actually requested that we do that again. So we're doing that with George. That'll be tremendous fun. and very entertaining for that's on, I think, the Friday night of the conference. Saturday, every day we have amazing speakers. We have 3 of the top people from the organization FREE, the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, Ray Hernandez, Dr. Rudy Shield, and of course, Mary Rodwell. So we have them each giving presentations at the beginning of the conference. This whole conference does kind of have a subtext, if you will, of the contact modalities that FREE established. There's these various ways that contact happens, and they call it the contact modalities. Bob Brown, our other senior producer, wanted to make sure that this conference addressed all those contact modalities. So we made sure that we had speakers whose either story and or their research emphasized one or more of those contact modalities. So one of the reasons we're starting off with the representatives from FREE each giving their lectures is to kick off that we will be addressing everything they're bringing up in the context of the whole conference. As you just said, we have Daniel Sheehan speaking. Both Bob Kiviat and Daniel Sheehan are doing individual lectures on Wednesday before the panel, and those lectures are going to address the whole To the Stars ATIP story in depth. They each have their own take, their own view. They both say there's reasons for concern, but their reasons for concern are there's some unique, I should say this, there's some similarities, minor, but most of it is different. So we have 2 different takes on it, and both individuals will be so dynamic in how they address that. As I said, I'm doing my MILAB lecture, and I don't have everything right in front of me. We have George Knapp doing a closing. Let me emphasize a couple of things. We have George Knapp on the Saturday being the last lecture, the last primary lecture. And he's going to do like a year in review. I keep calling it the State of the Union for ufology. I'm actually think I'm going to tell Lorianne, we need to go in and add that to his description, the State of the Union, because he's going to say, look, this is everything that's happened recently. This is how it's all unfolded. This is where we are now. So kind of like a recap, but also up to the minute, because, as anyone knows, following these stories, they're evolving up to the minute. I mean, particularly the To the Stars ATIP thing, some other disclosure things, certainly everything Senator Reid has recently done, some major sighting events. I mean, there's stuff that's, it's been a we just started
year.
This year. It's February. It's already been a big year for ufology, already. So he's, up until the moment he steps on stage, he's going to recap and give all the latest, and
Melinda,
and
I did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wanted you to continue, but then I had a question for you after you're done.
Okay. Well, and then I'll just say, added on, for instance, we've added on Jeremy Corbell. Well, Jeremy's catching some flack out there for his movies, okay? And he wants to address some of the controversies. He wants, particularly both his Lazar movie and his Hunt for the Skinwalker, and address some of that and he's going to bring forward and show some of the parts that were left out for whatever reasons, everything from just the creative process, his creative choice at the time, down to time constraints, down to controversies, And so he said, look, I want to address that. I want to show some of the stuff that was left out, and I want to address some of what I'm hearing. And we're like, great, we love giving him the platform to be able to do that. So we're really thrilled that we're actually thrilled he's willing to come and do that. We think that's great. So as an example, oh my gosh, I'm just, my head's just going 8 miles a minute here trying to think of.
Well, the next couple of guests that we're going to have on here, I see in the lineup as well. Cheryl Costa, we're actually going to have on tomorrow.
Yeah.
She's going to be there.
Cheryl's also on our board, like me. She's one of the consultants on the board. And Cheryl's doing up to the minute research. It'll be absolutely fascinating. She's working on a new book, so we're really looking forward to hearing her presentation of the statistics and her findings, and and the bigger picture that points to. And then what's really cool, another thing we added on, we have a big closing dinner party on the following Saturday. And that buffet dinner party, we're going to have two, keynote addresses. One of them is a gentleman by the name of Peter Smith. He's actually the only one giving two full lectures at our event because there were two full dynamic subject matters. And he's doing one earlier in the week on one subject, but then he's going to be our keynote because he's wrapping it all up from the kind of an extraterrestrial point of view. What do we know about the ETs? What can we say we know? What can we say we understand? What might be the thinking or motivations? And it'll be absolutely fascinating. But then, and I'm not sure in the schedule if this is going to be before the next one or after it. I think before. But then we have, we're not afraid of controversy at this conference. That's for sure.
Okay.
Then we're having the guy who created the creator producer of the Project Blue Book TV show. I think his name's David O'Leary. I think
that's his name.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And he is being in it. Well, here, hang on. Don't anyone cringe or anything. Okay. First off, a lot of people really like the show. A lot of people are, as far as ufology, but the public loves it. Okay. So that's something to think of. The general public loves it. They're being picked up for more. They're going into another season. So, ratings are good. Okay. A. B, a lot of ufology likes it. Okay. Some of ufology is just okay with it. It says, okay, it's a dramatic retelling. We get it. Doesn't not be about being all accurate. Well, shoot, man, look at, X-Files. We all loved it, and it wasn't all about being accurate. So, is it harmful to ufology? No. In fact, it's causing interest. So it's not harmful at all. And occasionally they are addressing those famous historical cases and bringing that history to an audience unfamiliar with it, which is fantastic. Now, having it said that, is the show perfect? Nah, whatever. Okay, but we're going to have this guy, and we have George Knapp interviewing him. So George Knapp's going to ask the hard questions, okay? And we said, George, go for it. And he's like, absolutely, and he's excited to do it. So it's going to be George Knapp interviewing David. So we're very excited about that. And that will be, I'm sure extremely interesting, And anyway, so those are things that have been added. Everyone go to the website. I could go on, and
Yep.
I'm not here to just talk about the conference, obviously. So go to the website, which is www.ufomegacon.com. So it's UFOMEGACON.com.
And I'm going to jump in here and plug our show next week where we've got Peter Robbins, who is also in your lineup.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we have Peter coming doing the coolest thing. I look so forward to seeing Peter. I haven't seen him in a while, and I'm just so excited. Peter helped Bud Hopkins over all the years with, the late Bud Hopkins, abduction researcher, with his work. It helped him very closely. And Peter was very much involved when Bud was emphasizing and working with children and what the children abductees were coming up with in regressions and their memories and their drawings and their stories. It's like a sub-story to Bud's research that's remarkable. And Peter was right there involved in it. So Peter's it's kind of a two-part. The presentation is all about Bud's work with kids and what they said and what they came up with and their whole stories. But it's also kind of a tribute to Bud's remarkable work. And we're so thrilled that Peter's going to come do that for us. We're just so excited.
I'm sure he'll give us a nice preview next week when we have him on. And tomorrow when Cheryl's on with us, we'll get to some nice little previews with them. And Chant, what have you got there?
Well, actually, I didn't know whether he wanted to go on to the MILABS or...
Sure.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, that's
Go ahead.
well, that's research I've been doing for close to 30 years. My involvement in ufology really kicked off 30 years ago with a last-minute fluke of a trip out to Area 51 in Nevada, right when the Lazar. Hey, I got in this because of Lazar, no doubt, and I didn't kid with Knapp about this. It was the unfoldment of that story, and that led to which really started to unfold in like July and August of 1989, and then John Lear. That's another person we've added on, talking about not being afraid of controversy with our conference, is we have Carrie Cassidy of Project Camelot interviewing John Lear, kind of on the history of everything Lear, now known as the grandfather of conspiracy, and I have no doubt it'll be very interesting, very entertaining, and John is quite up there in age. Unfortunately, his health is not great, and Carrie's been working with him quite closely now for a while, and so we kind of cooked up this idea to have Carrie interview him on stage about his life's work, his life's history, and it's very likely to be John Lear's last public presentation anywhere. So we're also honoring his history and his past contribution. Now, I know he's extremely controversial. I know that. But this is a chance for him to kind of clear the air, say what he wants to say, also kind of a tribute to his history. And we're very glad to have him. And so, let's give the man a chance. And I said, it'll be interesting and entertaining. I know, again, Carrie's going to ask the tough questions. I know that for sure. So as anyone familiar with Carrie Cassidy and her work knows that she can do. So I'm really looking forward to that. And that's supposed to be the first Sunday night of the conference. Anyway, but the reason I brought that up is back when everything first started and John was going out there with Bob and seeing the test flights. So anyways, that ended up being that John went on a radio program being broadcast out of Vegas at the time called Billy Goodman's The Happening, telling Billy Goodman about going out there with Bob and Gene Huff at the time and seeing what they saw and everything. That led to people calling in the show and wanting to go out there. The producer set up for 2 buses to go out to the location. And my friends and I, who were listening to the program at the time, decided to drive out there and meet up with everyone on one of those famous huge sighting trips. And I had amazing sightings that first time. And that was September of 1989. And then we were so blown away. I was living in Southern California at the time, making the whole trip, like 5 hours to Vegas and then 2.5 hours out to Rachel, Nevada. And we made the whole trip 2 weeks later and then did it again a month after that. So in a 2-month period, I had taken 3 trips out to Rachel, Nevada to sit up all night out at the black mailbox, and see what was coming and going from the base. And it was remarkable. And I had sightings. So that was the beginning of my involvement in ufology. Now segueing that into my MILAB research is because of that, I started to realize and had a huge unfoldment process of realizing I was having alien abductions. And so I'm a lifelong abductee. I did not know it till 1989, but that was the beginning of my discovery process. Learning I had had childhood, teenage, young adult abductions, and then going into current things that started happening late 89, early 90, and have ever, happened since. And so the discovery process of my alien abductions started me looking into that, getting regression, regressive hypnosis, etc., and meeting other abductees. Well, all of a sudden, in August and November of 1989, I suddenly had a very different experience, what we now know as a MILAB experience, MIL for military and AB for abduction. And what that means is being an alien abduct, or at least in my research. So I have chose to focus with my research and the cases that I've worked with other people to people who have had alien abduction who then are targeted by covert human agencies. In fact, over the years, I've even tried to change the name because I hate the name MILABS. It has been, pardon my language, bastardized and misused in this community in such a way that people kind of shrink away when they hear it. As opposed
you're okay with the language, Melinda. We're on YouTube, so you can swear your head off if you want.
Okay, yeah. Oh, bastardized isn't that bad, right? Okay, so thank you. and so people are, so, but people have this like negative thing to it, and it's like, it's just because it's been misused and misquoted and misstated and the term, just for everyone's, knowledge, because I think people need to know this. The term MILABS was coined by an experiencer, abductee, by the name of Katerina Wilson. Okay. She wrote a number of abduction books, was in the 90s, very famous for coming out as a very public abductee. A very famous book called Alien Jigsaw. And she has an amazing website that's still active to this day called Alien Jigsaw. But she was the one who said, gosh, it's like, people who are alien abductees then get targeted by the military. They have harassment and surveillance and monitoring, and then they might get picked up and have, as opposed to an abduction at the hand of aliens, they might have an abduction at the hand of humans. And so she said it's like a military abduction, and so she coined the term MILAB. Okay. And then what really kind of pushed that out there into being accepted in the UFO community was an Austrian couple, Helmut and Marion Lammer. Helmut was a researcher in the field and started researching this and wrote a book called MILABS and about alien abductions and government involvement and government mind control. And so it was kind of looking at the mind control aspect of it. I'm very proud that I'm in his book. And in fact, he kind of had a chapter about me in his book. And so that kind of put it out there as being known in the community. Like I said, since then, other people have used it to describe other things that those folks never intended it to mean, for sure. But as I said, I tried to change the name and get into people calling it covert human involvement, because that's what it is. It's covert human agency involvement in the abduction phenomenon. It's abductees being targeted, being monitored, watched, followed, being befriended by insiders. And Lord knows I've got that in spades. I have had that in spades for 30 years. And so, but going back to unfolding for me is in August and November, I had these experiences that were military abductions. And even before that, for like the year leading up to that, I had what I now know is like harassment, surveillance, monitoring. And I'm now realizing, and I'll emphasize this a little bit more in my lecture at the conference too, that I'm kind of off on a tangent, but one famous abductee who wrote a book about her own experiences, and she's very well known in the remote viewing community, Angela Thompson Smith, wrote a book about her own alien abduction experiences a number of years ago, and has kind of shied away from that because she's tried to build a career for herself in remote viewing, and so not really emphasizing the abduction stuff. But when she wrote her book, she coined a term called minders, which are abductees and MILAB cases then get, like I said, befriended by intelligence, military, insiders, aerospace guys, etc. And those people are like minding you, like the idea of handlers, if you will, to some degree, but also more like just keeping tabs on you. And so she came up with that term, and so I borrow it to say, minders. Well, now I realize back then in 93, I didn't realize I had minders. I thought I realized that years later. It turns out I already did. And it turns out one of those individuals was involved in my life prior to my knowing I was an alien abductee, prior to 89, back in the mid 80s, or I'd have to think about the exact year, but somewhere between 83 and 85, something like that. And I think back and I go, wait a second. Now, I had one of these folks in my life. So the realization that some of these insider types knew I was an abductee before I did is coming around, and that's not a far reach. I mean, because he so much, this gentleman's now deceased, but at the time, not at that time, but since, in years since, he so much as admitted that to me. And some of the other guys, some of his cronies, some other people have so much as admitted that to me that they were aware of me back then. So it's like, oh, wait a second. I didn't know I was an alien abductee till 89. I didn't know I had military involvement till 93. And yet here I had these guys going back with me prior to all that. So that's nuts, but it's true. And so what had happened in is having an experience in like I said, August and then November, where I had an experience when I was taken by the military. And one of those was a medical procedure and a follow-up medical procedure. I'll talk all about that. Now, just so people know, my lecture at the conference is not about my own experiences. Yes, I'm going to cover some of my own experience in there. It's about my research and my working with other people. But I do also include some of my own experience, and I'm going to include more of my own experience than I ever have. I keep being encouraged to do that every time I lecture about it. And so every time I lecture, I've been introducing more and more of my own. And so again, I'm going to have more and more of my own in the lecture. But I didn't want to have it be about me, because I've done, not only have I had my own experiences with it all along, that's what started me investigating other people, was realizing this was happening to other people and having other abductees share their accounts with me of harassment and surveillance monitoring, of having a military abduction, and then having the major researchers, people in the UFO abduction research community and outside of the abduction research with the rest of ufology share accounts with me and send people to me. And so it kind of grew. I became very good friends with the late Dr. Carla Turner and her work in this. In fact, my being out there researching it and speaking about it came about in great part from support from her and her saying, you got to talk about this. You've got to include this. Because I was starting to just come out about my alien abduction when she said, Melinda, you got to include this. And I'm like,
I'm glad you mentioned her, because while credit is due to the individual you mentioned for having coined the acronym MILAB, or MILAB as some people pronounce, that person was not the first to introduce the notion of possible military intelligence involvement in the abduction phenomenon. As you know, for many years, this subject was widely spoken and written about by abductees such as Leah Haley in 1993, Dr. Carla Turner in 1994, Debbie Jordan in 94, all people you know, Kim Carlsberg, 1994, Mia Adams, 1995, and even Whitley Strieber, 1995, to name a few. There's also research mentioning military involvement in ET abductions and work such as the MUFON Transcription Project in 95 and the Andreessen Affair faced by Ray Fowler as far back as 1980, where he writes about Betty Andreessen's and Bob Luca's accounts of black helicopter involvement. All of this long before the acronym that we know about. Again, everybody you are extremely familiar with, but I just wanted to mention that.
Well, you would love if you saw my book out. Chant, you would love if you saw my book outline and chapters. Okay, everyone out there, I've been writing a book on this since I started to get into it, and I've never completed it because I'm too busy doing the research, and now I'm just also too busy working. But eventually I'll get back to it. And you would be really thrilled, because everything you just mentioned, all those names, all those people, how the research unfolded is all in there. I mean, I'm thank you. First off, I want to applaud you for being so up on the subject, because you're absolutely right. Everything you just mentioned, and you would, it'd be a reward for both of us if you saw my outline, my chapters, everything I've got in there. You would go, oh my God, because I am covering all of that in there, and you're saying that also is telling me I got to get back to that, because you just brought up a lot of names and a lot of history that people don't know. You and I know, but a lot of people don't. And I'm realizing I've got to do this book because I've got to include that. And yes, and going back to Carla's work, going back to the work of all those other individuals you just mentioned, as well as the experiences of some of those people, and to the fort. Everyone's saying, oh, my lab stopped. It's not happening as much. No, folks, I am telling you, it is increased. I have more cases coming forward all the time. Nothing has gone away. The involvement of military and intelligence community and insiders, interest and knowledge of the abductees, there's nothing about it that's gone away. And if anything, it's becoming more, I guess, mainstream, because it gets into, and then the segues into the history of the group of people behind the whole To the Stars ATIP thing, because it's directly involved. And
go ahead. I want to hear what you have to say, but I have another question. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'm just, anyways, I applaud you, Chant, for what you were saying and your knowledge there, because that tells me you have a deep knowledge of it. Thank you. And exactly. So that's what started for me in 93, was realizing I was having it happen, meeting those other abductees, becoming friends with them. He said, not only do I know them, I'm very good friends with them. And realizing, okay, I'm not the only one. This is happening to other people. And then, like I said, Carla encouraging me to say, you got to get out there and share this. And yes, I then at the same time met a research partner, Randy Kopang, who, so I've not been alone in doing all this. I kind of have a research partner in my research, a dear friend and amazing researcher. Another famous researcher in the field said many years ago, any researcher with a salt in this field gets to know Randy Kopang. And I know Daniel Sheehan is very close to him, and so I think he would agree. But he's an amazing asset and been a tremendous help. But it gets into the whole MILAB, which is, again, why that's happening. And I think it's important to address that. Why that's happening is it's happening because the alien abductions are real. Because alien abduction is really not only real, but very important and significant. It addresses why the aliens are here, what they're, extraterrestrials are here, what they're doing, and what their interest is in humans, the human race. And then the MILABs are, you have these covert human guys managing the UFO subject. Large underground military installations developing this technology are managed by somebody. The cover-up is managed by somebody. The policy of non-disclosure is managed. So those managing the UFO subject in all those covert ways had an interest in the abductees, because they knew that what was happening to the abductees was significant, and what was happening to the abductees was something they could learn from, and that the abductees knew information that they wanted. So it gets into, they're interrogating the abductees about the technology. Abductees have flown and navigated ships. They've been shown propulsion systems, weapons, everything. So they want to know, what do you know? What have you seen? What have you had hands on? Abductees have been given mathematical formulas. One picture I was going to share with you guys, I had a technical problem, everybody, from being able to give them more pictures to use during this.
I've got those up, the drawings that you sent. I've got 4 of them. Good.
Well, one, and some of those are related to alien abduction, and some of them are related to military abduction. I did give you a picture of me in like a hazmat environment where I'm on an exam table, and there's guys in clean suits. That's one of my early alien abductions. Not alien, I'm sorry, one of my early military abductions. And in that one, it just so happens, oh God, this is a whole nother side story, but like I said, my first two I came across in August and November of 93. One of those was an interrogation about technology. And a lot of drugging and mind control and stuff happened in that. And it took many, many regressions with a couple different hypnotherapists to get through that, as well as a lot of work on my own. I had a lot of memory already of it, but I had huge areas of it being blocked. And I really wanted to get into what were they really wanting to know from me at the time. And it was all about technology. In fact, it was like being a spy for them to look for a specific piece of technology that they knew part of something on and they wanted to know more about. And then in the military abduction, I was taken to an underground base and I was interrogated and drugged quite a bit. And it was they actually had me draw parts of that technology that I saw. And then another experience that happened. So that was one of those ones from August, November of 93. The other one was a specific event where I was had a follow-up medical procedure. It's it gets very, very personal. They did basically in the abduction and abortion on me, a very early term uteral scrape kind of abortion procedure. And what happened is I had a couple physical symptoms beforehand. I was not pregnant to my knowledge at all, but I had the signs of very likely being. And then I had this experience, and then, that was gone, but then I had all the healing afterwards. A couple years later, I was to speak at a MUFON group in Minnesota, and a gentleman came forward after my lecture there and wanted to talk to me privately. He told me he was a doctor that specialized in, he was like a gynecological surgeon who specialized in problem pregnancies, and he questioned me all about it. And afterwards told me I answered his questions quite accurately, that he knew I didn't have the medical knowledge, but that I described in great detail an experience, a procedure that he's performed. And so here I had this gentleman back up, and explain to me what had happened to me, and that it meant that there had been a problem pregnancy, and that at that point it was, terminated. I believe, because I had no knowledge of being pregnant and I was not seeing anyone at the time, but I was having back-to-back abductions, that this was probably a hybrid fetus. Now, I've had three, for those familiar with the alien abduction subject. I've had 3 child presentations in my experiences at various ages, and then one of them that I was presented as a child, I got to see her again as an adult in many, many, many years later in another abduction. So I saw her as a child and then saw her again as an adult. But I've had 3 child presentations and I guess 1 adult hybrid presentation. But in this experience, it appears that the military guys did this abduction on me so that they could have that fetal tissue. There were ETs also involved. That's also another very common thing in this MILAB event. You can have something that's just humans, but you can also have humans and aliens present. You can also have predominantly an alien experience, but have military or covert or guys in lab coats, humans in an official capacity also participating, even though it's predominantly an alien experience. And then, of course, you can also have full-blown just military. And then you can have experiences that are, in many ways, both. So you can be taken by ETs, see humans present. You can be taken by humans, see ETs present, and everything in between, in other words, as well as just flat out pure alien abduction. But in that experience, they were doing this, procedure. And I do know now I know that they were removing a hybrid fetus, that there was something wrong probably. And so the ETs, because there were also ETs present, were letting them have that, have that tissue, that whatever. So, and it took a lot to get through that experience. But again, all these things I'm saying, these are not uncommon for people with these events. Some people just have low-grade harassment and surveillance, and it never escalates. The abductee might have low-grade harassment surveillance. It never escalates to their being abducted. Then there are people that have the, harassment surveillance and start to have the abduction, by the military. Some people, like I said, have the alien abduction, see military personnel present. But then it goes beyond that. Some people start to have, like I said, the minder scenarios, the monitoring, the interfacing in their life. And then some people get recruited into research programs. They get recruited. I met one gentleman, as an example, alien abductee, starts to have the MILABS stuff, gets intense. They then recruit him. They then start using him as a MILAB perpetrator. So he was first an alien abductee, and then he's involved with the team of people abducting other abductees. So he becomes one of them, a perpetrator. He gets recruited into a program to that point. My later research gets all into, and I'll cover this in my lecture, into that recruitment and people being used in these other programs, in these other ways by covert humans, whether they're military or intelligence or aerospace or whatever, but all the above, and science, and et cetera, et cetera. I don't even know all the branches of the covert world involved. All I know is what people are sharing, what they're remembering, what they're reporting. But there's these consistent patterns, and I talk about how it ramps up in a person's life to where it can get into being very much involved in covert programs. And now, I'm not just so anyone out there. I've never come in my research. Never come across anything like a 20 back program, anything like that. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying I've never, ever come across it.
Melinda, in one of your lectures, you talk about Bob Wood, Dr. Robert Wood, correct? Do you recall that?
I mentioned him as part of the working group.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask you a question. In 1997, he confirmed his involvement with multiple details of the ATPWG. With a quote you said he told you, which was the answer to a larger umbrella group. Can you please explain the acronym and let us know a little bit more about that quote you said?
Sure. Well, and I know you put this out there as talking about the aviary and stuff. So now we're segueing into all that,
yes.
which is good. Okay, perfect segue. So as I started to get more into this, I kept coming up with certain names that were coming up in the minder scenarios and other things, which started me kind of looking into all that. And in that came across research of a group called the ATPWG, or Advanced Theoretical Physics Working Group. And yes, in more recent years, things have been said about that. Some of the members involved with it have come out so much and admitted their involvement and written about the history. But I was aware of it in the early 90s, really aware of it in the early 90s. And as it turns out, what we call in ufology the aviary, that was a nickname given by a couple of researchers to some people who are part of this group. Now, a lot of times when I say group, you think of it as a bigger group, and then at times subgroups of a bigger group will be involved in different parts of ufology. And one of those subgroups, if you will, were the gentlemen who were an ad hoc group, loosely kind of leaking and disclosing some information that became known as the aviary. Okay?
Why don't Melinda, real quick, why don't you run through the names of some of the people who were reported to be part of this little circle?
Oh, gosh. This is where I wish I had. Hang on, let me see if I can bring this up my computer. This is where I wish I had those pictures. You guys, I had technical problems. Last night I was trying to send these guys some more pictures to use during my interview today. And I had some technical problems and wasn't able to do it.
Do you want me to go ahead and mention some names for you?
No, I've got it right here. I just brought it up. I have it up right here on my laptop.
Okay.
Unfortunately, so I wasn't able to send this. But, there's a group that Grant calls the Cosmic Club. Mm-hmm. And there's certain names that keep coming up. And there's a history going back. I do a whole nother lecture. And by the way, everyone, that lecture is can be viewed for free. I gave it last August for MUFON, Sonoma, Marin County. And Lorian Fenton is the director of it. And I asked her, and so she did, made it available for free for viewing because even though she had her audience there that day, I've been trying to get it out there in ufology for everyone to watch. It's a lecture that I did on the 40-year history of the working group. And
yes, I watched it.
They are very
great.
much have everything to do with what this current big story in ufology is of the ATIP to the Stars program. So, for instance, I have here, and I'm just going to describe this since I wasn't able to give it to you guys. It is like a little spreadsheet, and it's actually quite larger than what I have here on my screens, but I just have the first part. And what I did is I put the players, which Grant calls the Cosmic Club. So I call all the players down the left side. And then across the top, kind of what their involvement has been. For instance, if I knew that they were in the ATP, Advanced Theoretical Physics, and the working group, so the ATP working group, if they were on the To the Stars board or in a support group. Now, as many of you may know, and people listening to this, I have met the To the Stars Director of Operations, Jim Semivan, and somewhat become friends with him. Okay.
Yes, we were going to ask you about him.
Okay. Well, one thing he told me on just over a year ago, because it was funny, I was just reviewing that and realized it was the same day as the Super Bowl a year ago. So not this year's Super Bowl, but last year's Super Bowl. This is the day that I met with him. So it makes it easy to remember the day. So Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday is when I met with him, and he was here in Sedona. It's kind of a long story how that happened. But one of the things he had told me in that meeting was that To the Stars was the public face of a much bigger group. So we always think of the board of directors and everybody looks at that. Well, he mentioned that it was a group of 50 people. I've heard from some others loosely associated with it that it might be closer to 200 people. So whether it's 50 or 200, let's just say it's clearly more than just the board of directors. So if I knew for certain that they were either on the board or served some consulting position to them in some other capacity other than a board member, I put a check mark. Okay. And I call, and then I had, so I called whether they were on the To the Stars and if they had a direct history in the ATIP program at the Pentagon, and they got a check mark for that. And I called those two categories new disclosure. And then I had a section I call old disclosure, which consists of the Rockefeller Initiative, NIDS, National Institute of Discovery Sciences, the AVIARY, ISSO, which was Joe Firmage's thing he tried to start up, and then ufology field involvement as far as disclosing within the ufology field. And I called those categories, that's 5 categories, old disclosure. And so I have this going across the top of the graph. And then the next thing on the top of the graph is intelligence community involvement. So if I knew for sure that the person was involved in the intelligence community. And then I had what I called ET tech development. So for instance, guys who were involved in BASS, Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Science Studies, okay? So if they had BASS involvement, if they had Lockheed Aerospace, like United Launch Alliance, Lockheed, that involvement, if they had advanced technology involvement other than those other 2 areas, like other like Boeing and other things, but, I knew that they were involved in that way. And then the next category was what I called it ET mind, because I didn't have room in the graph to say consciousness, but ET consciousness. And so if the person had a background in psi or paranormal research, parapsychology, psi research background, the remote viewing background, that stuff. The next one was if they had a specific background or involvement in abduction research, whether they funded abduction research, were involved in an abduction research organization, whether they consulted to an abduction researcher writing their book, whatever, if they had a direct involvement. And then the last one was neuroscience or DNA research. So here I'm just going to, then what I did is I listed all the names, and then I put checks going across all those categories. So it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So it's whatever, 16 or 17 categories. And then how many, checks did they check off on? And then I kind of put the list somewhat in order. Now, a lot of these guys tie for how many things, but I'm just going to read them in order. So here you go. Here's some names. Interestingly enough, the guy that came up with the most amount of checks was Robert Bigelow. So
interesting,
okay,
but not surprising, really.
Exactly. So the first person was Robert Bigelow. Next person, Dr. Hal Puthoff, then Dr. Colm Kelleher, then Colonel John Alexander, then Dr. Christopher Green, then Luis Elizondo, then Dr. C.B. Scott Jones, then Colonel Ron Blackburn, then Steve Justice, Dr. Ron Pandolfi, Dr. Eric Davis, Dr. Jacques Vallée, Dr. Bruce Maccabee, Jim Semivan, Dr. Gary Nolan, Dr. Paul Rapp, Chris Mellon, Jack Houck, and et cetera, et cetera. So, these are the ones that just happen to be on my screen right now. So, and then there's more. So it kept going. And then, like I said, I went across and said, how many things, and so how many things did they check off on? Now, not everybody's in everything. By all means, I think the most that came up as far as checks was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. Added like 17 things, like 14 checks, and a lot of them had 12 or 10 or 8 or 9. So as it went down, and so those are just some of the names. Now, everyone who follows the To the Stars A thing knows most of those names. If you have followed the aviary history, you're going to know a lot of those names. And if you have followed it all, the working group, John Alexander wrote a book where he mentioned his involvement in the working group and talked about it. I think that was kind of to deflect away from it having any significance. This is another graph. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get these guys to you. I'm so bummed. But if everybody watches all these things I'm talking about, my pictures, my graphs, of course, everything regarding to the MILABS will be in that presentation. And there is a presentation online that someone can pay to view, but it won't be as updated as the one I'm about to give. And then the other presentation on this matter, because this stuff I'm not talking about at the conference. It's a separate lecture, but this lecture is available for free, and I'll give you guys the link to that. So when you post this, when you've posted the completed interview, in the text down below it, you can put the links, both of, obviously the conference links as well as my tour link.
If we could get that graph, that'd be great too.
This link to this free presentation, because and you can say this is the free presentation she mentioned. Okay, and people can go and watch this. So these graphs I'm talking about are clearly in that presentation. I mean, they're part of my PowerPoint. So, but I did this one of a timeline starting in 1980, going forward to the present. And after I have two versions of a timeline in that presentation. One is this graph that just is like a colored bar going across, okay, bar graph. The other timeline gets down to a breakdown with like a paragraph about each thing that happened, okay? But just to give you the visual on this one, is I have the names going down the left of associations and groups, and across the top are the years that they existed. And the years I knew for sure are kind of in a bold color, and the years that I'm uncertain are in a pale color. So the first thing is the working group, which started with kind of, I know that it existed before a meeting at BDM Corporation in Virginia, where they had an official kickoff. I knew that it meant it was before then, but they did have this initial meeting in 1980. So I have the notes and everything from that. Okay. And then you have the Aviary, which kicks off right about in the same time period. And then I have Bigelow's involvement. So you go from the working group and the Aviary starting in the 80s going all the way forward, kind of somewhat disbanding maybe in 2001, but yet I think going on under other guises, which I'm about to describe. And then the Aviary, which only roughly existed for like 5 to 10 years, depending on which research you're looking at and whatever. But it was part of that because it was the same members. And then Bigelow's involvement, I show, is really kicking off in 1990. And then, of course, very much all the way to current. So his green, he gets the color green going all the way across to the current. And then the Rockefeller Initiative.
Melinda, I'd just like to cut in here and mention something about Robert Bigelow and something you're already aware of, but just for our audience to know a little bit more about. And that is Bigelow Aerospace, obviously owned by Robert Bigelow, the American businessman. His company, it was revealed by the New York Times and the Washington Post, was paid by the Pentagon to store parts recovered from crashed, unidentified aerial phenomena. Military speak for UFOs, as you know. Exotic materials believed to be alloys that defied scientific analysis and physically affected those who came into contact with them. Anyway, please go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. That's good. Because you're right. We can't assume that everybody listening knows. But I first show him showing up on the radar, if you will. Him showing up in an interest in the subject matter and backing various projects going on in the UFO field, including a project with Bob Lazar, actually, going back to 1990. Yes. So I show that, and then that line goes forward. Then I have the Rockefeller Initiative kicking off in like 1993, going all the way from 1993 to 2016. And then Bigelow's involvement, interestingly enough, with MUFON, which there was a specific involvement starting in 93 and going to 2011 for sure, and even questionably still. One of these days, Jan Harson's a good friend of mine. I got to sit down and say, what degree are they involved in?
He said there's no.
I can say definitively.
Yeah, we just talked to him about that.
Definitively to like 2011, 2012. Mm-hmm. But there was a lot of involvement. I mean, direct funding of things they were doing.
Jan did say on one of our interviews with him that he would love to have Robert Bigelow consider getting involved again if he wished to, but right now he's not involved with.
Well, I definitely show that to 2011, 2012, and possibly it continued beyond there. How many years? I'm not certain. Okay. Then I have the NIDS existence, which I have is kicking off squarely in 1995, National Institute of Discovery Sciences, and then ending in 2007, but possibly going up to about 2010. So I have some overlap there. Then I have BASS, Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Science Studies, starting in 99 and then going to almost the present, but I had an interesting conversation with Colin Kelleher that suggests that maybe BASS ended in 2016, 2017. So, but I kind of question that.
Well, Kelleher's a pretty interesting guy, if you don't mind me stopping here and asking you a little bit about him, because he was in charge, the chief scientist, may have had a different title, but I think essentially he was the chief scientist for Bigelow's NIDS organization. and is now migrated over to the Stars Academy. So how'd you come in contact with him, and how did all that happen?
And that's why I did this chart. You just brought up a point, which was the point of this chart. When you look at these color bars, they're all going on at the same time. There was a period from roughly 1998, maybe a little bit before, till 2010, where all these things existed simultaneously. There was overlap. And you go, well, wait, BAS started, kept going. Well, when did NID stop? Well, did NID stop and become BAS? No, there was a transition of an overlap, and yet it's all the same players. So you go, well, wait a second, these are the Cosmic Club, these are the players, And so, and then you go into the, ATIP and then its existence starting in 2007. And there's questions even still in the community now about, does it still go till today?
Mm-hmm.
Depending on what research and whose stuff you follow. Some people say yes, some people say no. But I think it's really important to say Lou Elizondo says it still exists.
Yeah.
I have him recorded in 3 different interviews, not with me, with other people, but 3 different interviews where he clearly said it still exists. So,
Melinda, I know you're going to cover this, but I really want to know at what point you feel that Dr. Christopher Kit Green and also Dr. Ronald Pandolfi, both of who you know very well, where they fit in all of this.
Well, okay. That's why I did that other chart. I'm going to go back to that, and I'll look them up specifically.
Okay. All
right. They both were involved back with the Aviary.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been involved all along.
Yes. That's my understanding.
Ron's kind of on the outs. I don't know if that's a diversion. I don't know if he's somehow on the outs with them, and now he's just trying to create problems for them. I don't know the answer to that. It could be either or both. He's creating problems for him either way. But
So, do you believe that the Aviary is a group convened by the Defense Department to research alien?
No, hang on. Okay, everyone tossed the Aviary idea. All that was a nickname given to these guys. That was always the working group. It was the working group. The nickname was given because of the bird names assigned to these guys by Moore and Chandray. And Moore and Chandray said, we got to give names because we're talking to these guys, and so people don't know who we're talking about. We'll give them bird names.
Right.
Okay?
So my understanding,
and that's how you came up with the Aviary. They never called themselves the Aviary ever.
Got it. Okay. And my understanding is,
except for maybe just maybe they did over the years called themselves the Aviary just out of because as a joke, because that was like a joke. It was the working group.
My understanding is that Ron, again, Pandolfi, his Aviary, his moniker regarding this Aviary, the term being used loosely here, I guess, is Pelican. And
they all have bird names.
Right, and I think that there was a few more I wanted to mention, and that is there's other names like Owl and Blue Jay.
Condor's one of them.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
There's a whole list of names. Another one is catfish, but that's not really a bird name. But
there was a list of 10 to 20 guys that I think it's like 20, that were all given these bird names because they were coming up in their handling of that. And what's more important is to go, everyone goes aviary. I think that they don't mind that's being said because it's a diversion from what they were doing at the time. Okay. What they did was put out a TV show to put out some misinformation. So they did that. And
that was
what they
the one hosted
did
by
was
Mike
release
Farrell.
A bunch of documents that we now know as the MJ-12 story.
Right.
So you go, well, wait a second, So I believe that they orchestrated the release of all that. And just like they've orchestrated the existence of ATIP, and which is begat then to the Stars Academy. And so that timeline that I was just giving gets into the overlap with ATIP going on, with the overlap with To the Stars, and takes us up to the current day. In specific question to answer to your question, going across with Kit Green on that other chart that where I have the working group to the Stars board or support, the ATIP program, blah, blah, blah. So I have Kit Green having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 out of like 16 possible things you could check off. So he had yes to, he was in 12 of them. So was Kit Green involved in the working group? Yes. And the AVIARY and all that, he goes back. So working group, to the stars board. Okay, there you go. NIDS, yes. AVIARY, yes. Ufology field involvement, absolutely. Intelligence community involvement, yes.
Worked for the CIA. That's pretty involved.
Yeah. I mean, he ran the weird desk before Ron did.
He's also
and then you have.
Go ahead. That's fine. I just wanted to mention.
You have the BASS. He was on BASS, Lockheed ULA, Advanced Technology, Sire Para Research, Abduction Research, and Neuroscience and DNA. Ding, 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 all the way across. Okay.
And he is also the assistant dean of the Wayne State School of Medicine in Detroit, Michigan. Of course, he has a PhD, and he holds clinical appointments as professor in departments of diagnostic radiology, psychiatry, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So that's why I'm checked off on all of those. Ron, though, Ron's a different, more tricky character. I tried to really be, believe it or not, when I put this together and I checked off which category people were in, I tried to be really conservative. I had to come across evidence and supporting information that clearly put them there, and some people I went back and took some checks out when I wasn't completely sure. And Ron's one of those characters that makes you go, and even a few people I have some question marks on the list, like, how much do they go back to being in the working group itself? They came into it later. Were they part of that? And if I couldn't clearly place them there, I gave him a question mark. But Ron gets a check in the working group and AVIARY, working group for sure. So let me look across here. Working group for sure. Rockefeller Initiative for sure. AVIARY for sure. Intelligence community for sure. Advanced technology for sure. Sire Para Research, Abduction Research, and Neuroscience and DNA. So Ron goes ting, ting, ting. So he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. So he's got 8 of those things when Kit had 12. So there you go.
Okay, so we're getting into the home stretch here. We got to wrap this up shortly. Yeah. So one name that you did bring up, and I know you've had some personal contact with him. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Jim Semivan and your contact with him? Yeah. We want to get to that.
Yeah, well, Jim fell a little lower on this first page of the list with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, only 6 of those things marked off. Now, could be more involved, and again, I could only put what I came across. And I've always said, were these people more involved than I have on there?
Well, we know he's involved with the To the Stars Academy now.
Yeah, that's right. So Jim Semivan, like you said, he's involved with To the Stars Academy. He's actually their managing director. And so, our director of operations, I guess, is his title,
Yeah, and, he's a former CIA director of operations. You're right. Yes.
Yeah, and he has a long background with the CIA. That says that there in his bio, and more information can be found online that says all that. He was very, very high-level CIA for at least a couple of years. He continued to consult to them till sometime in this last year, when he explained to me that he had finished working some, projects with them. It's always been a joke in ufology, or no, not a joke, it's probably the truth, that you never really leave the CIA,
Right, right.
And so, could they ask him to consult on something at any moment? Yes. He's still under tons of security oaths and all that, of course. But he completed, within this last year, projects he was involved in. And so that's kind of what we know for sure. A lady who came out on my tour, I don't want to go into great detail, but I had a client on my tour explain to me that she knew him. Ended up having a great time on my tour. Her and I hit it off. She had something coming up where she was actually going to be getting together with him. She expressed that I can't wait to tell him all about this. And she did. He, as it turned out, already had a trip planned coming to Sedona or through the area. He had to come to, I think it was Scottsdale for something in Arizona. And she plugged me heavily with him. So at that point, when he always was going to be in the area or come to Scottsdale, him and his wife, he contacted me and said, I'd like to meet you. And so he came here. I had lunch with him and his wife. It was very lovely. And I kind of prepared myself and said, I have questions, and I wanted to know everything I could about them and what they were doing, meaning to the stars and the ATIP and everything. And he wanted to know about my MILABS research, of course. So we talked, and that was that. And then we kind of stayed loosely in touch because I think he contacted me once wanting to ask about something, and I've contacted him a couple of times wanting to ask him about something. I purposely kind of left him alone because, you don't want to wear out your welcome. And yet have had a couple of interesting conversations and a couple of interesting emails with him. I think there's been a total of, over history, let's say 3 significant emails, and I probably have had a total of 5, 3, it's hard to say. 4, I'll say 4 or 5 significant phone conversations with him. And that's that, and I think he's very guarded when he speaks with me. And, but he's, he has said some interesting things. And
well, what has he told
right
you?
Now, I'll state this for everyone. I know they'll want to know, well, what's going on now? They're being told, and he told me this about 2 or 3, I can't remember exactly. It was at least 2, no, I think it was about 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago in a phone conversation, he specifically said that they're being told to stop talking by both their government connections, their aerospace connections, and they are involved in a couple of different TV shows, I think namely 3 production companies doing television stuff. Those production companies have them sign NDAs that until those shows come out, they wouldn't talk about them, and they wouldn't talk about the same subject matter in those shows. There's going to be absolutely nothing new in those shows for anyone following this subject matter. It's going to be a retelling of what we already know so far.
That's disappointing.
Yeah. Oh, they're television. For a huge amount of the audience, it will be new and it will be amazing, just like it's been for us who have followed the subject matter.
So,
but
Melinda,
for us, it'll be like, okay, there's nothing new.
Melinda, do you mind if I cut in here? Jim Simivan, who's an experiencer along with his wife, they had interaction with an alien being in their room about 30 years ago. And he refers to it rather hazily in his foreword to his Secret Machines, to Tom's Secret Machines book. Do you have any information to share about that?
Well, this is what I can say. Yes, it happened. We talked about it that day at lunch. It was the one major part of the discussion that he asked me not to go out there and share. Because I said, how much of what we talked about can I share? And, I'm going to. The one part that he really asked me, other than to say, yes, it happened, was, and him and his wife, they went into the experience with me, was that abduction. It was highly personal. And yes, they had an alien abduction event. So, and that much is known. That much, he kind of wished, I think that much wasn't out there, but it is. The cat's out of the bag on that one. But the details of it is the one thing I did say I would not share. So I can't talk about the details. But you guys, I'll tell you this. As an abductee and anyone familiar with the abduction subject, there was nothing. I mean, yes, there was an abduction, but it was common. It's not to him because he was unaware of some of those details that would happen for other people. He's not, him and his wife certainly aren't the only abductees. They're certainly not the first people to have experiences like his. And there were traumatic elements to it, as there often are for many abductees. Not to say that the abduction is bad or wrong in any way, but often the initial reaction is trauma, and so there was a traumatic reaction. But again, the details of it are common in abduction accounts.
Okay, well, I think the reason why it is important is because of his ties to TTSA, along with the fact, stuff you, again, already know, but I want to let our listeners know about, that he joined the Central Intelligence Agency in '83 and had a 25-year career there. And he also worked briefly for the Directorate of Science and Technology, and then also transferred to the Directorate of Operations, the clandestine service, for the bulk of his career. But when somebody at that level in the CIA talks about being an experiencer, and includes a family member such as his wife, and has had it in his own home, people listen to that. It's of the utmost importance to a lot of people, because he's not just like any other person, so to speak. And what I mean by that, in is a very narrow way, not everybody is a part of the intelligence community. And so for somebody to be that high up, being actually willing to divulge that kind of information is absolutely astounding.
Well, and it's, it speaks, that goes two ways. On one hand, you can go, well, this is this high-level intelligence guy, and he's talking about this, and he's personally affected by this, which why is he doing all this? Well, now you know his motivation, what's driving him. He's had his own personal experience. That's often the case. Most of the guys in the in the Cosmic Club have had personal experiences. Certainly, probably all of them. What drives us as researchers? We've had personal experiences. If you're not an abductee contactee, you've had sightings, or someone in your family did, or something that this has personally affected you. Certainly in my case, and in your case, for sure. So it's driving us. Same with these guys. And sometimes it's also what they had knowledge about or were privy to in their professional backgrounds, being a part of it and knowing the truth and feeling like people need to know this kind of thing. That speaks to some of the motivations anyways.
Okay.
Now the trick is, on one, especially in his case, does he have one foot in, I'm an experiencer and I'm involved, and some of the other gentlemen and women, I shouldn't say just gentlemen, but some of the other people involved in the working group. But on the other hand, they have a foot in deep in intelligence work, and therefore could they have other agendas running? Absolutely. Now in the case of Jim, I don't know what all the other agendas might be. And am I friendly with him? Yes. Do I keep him at arm's length to a certain degree? Yes.
And just to jump in, Melinda, you do believe
because
that Jim
I don't know what all those other agendas might be.
You believe Jim, and don't think he's just making this up to curry favor with the community.
As far as his own personal experience,
yes,
I absolutely believe it.
Okay.
No, when him and his wife went into the detail of it, it is absolutely a real event. I absolutely believe it.
So they both confirmed this to you.
Now, did he present evidence to me that day that they had that experience? No, but they talked about it in a way. I've over the years, over 30 years of being in this field and being very involved in the abduction field, abduction research. I've talked to, and I have people come on my tour every night who open up and start. Not every night, but at least 1 in 10 tours, probably even 1 in 5 tours. Someone opens up and starts sharing their abduction account. It just happens as part of it. Usually it's because somebody asked me about mine, I open up, and that causes other people to open up. Yeah. It happens to a lot of people. 2 different Roper polls said over 4 million people in the continental U.S. alone. So you go, okay, well, wait a second. All these people having alien abductions. What it speaks to is when I heard his account, I can say this much. It spoke to, you had to go to, this is just like any abductee, him and his wife, sharing their account with me. It sounded like any abductee sharing how this has affected them, what they went through, and you go, okay, this is a person who went through this. aside from his background and everything, who's troubled by it and its implications and what it means, just like thousands of other abductees that I've spoken to and counseled. Now, I'm not, just so everyone knows, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a hypnotherapist, I'm just a researcher and experiencer, but as an investigator. So I'm an abduction and UFO investigator, researcher, experiencer. So, but that's put me in a, quote, therapeutic role, if you will, or at least a soundboard, someone can tell me and I can respond, And so, I've heard thousands of abductees. I mean, and what I can tell you is he's just, when it comes to that, he's going through the stuff that everybody else goes through.
Got it. So Chant, we're
the
running
nature of abduction, and it just happens that's his background.
All right. Well, I'd like to end with a quote that Melinda gave during one of her wonderful lectures, and that is Colonel Philip Corso said, "The cover-up is the disclosure, and the disclosure is the cover-up." Melinda, thank you very much for having been on our show today.
Yep. Thanks a lot, Melinda.
Colonel Corso said that, and I think that's very, very important. My research partner and I, Randy Kopang, keep going back to that to help understand what is going on in this game, this elaborate 40-year game. And it's not just these guys. I just came across the working group. They're not the only ones involved in this. They're just something I came across. But what makes them matter now is they are behind the history of NIDS, BAS, ATIP. You go to NIDS, you go from NIDS into BAS into ATIP and its involvement at Bigelow Aerospace, and then you go into the To the Stars guys. So it's directly part of that story. The group behind that has a 40-year history. That's the point there.
Fantastic. Thanks, everybody.
And like Corso said, the cover-up is the disclosure. The disclosure is the cover-up. How are they keeping it covered up? By a disclosure game. How are they disclosing? By revealing some of the cover-up. It works both ways, and that's very important.
Okay, well, Melinda, thanks a lot. We did have to cut things short because we got to get out of here. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow with Cheryl Costa. Thanks, Melinda. You have a good one. Bye-bye now.
Thank you, guys.